afternoon. Andy with AJ's. Looking at the Wildcat 1000 steering system, the slider rod assembly, the gearbox and mounting plates, also the felt pads. What we've got here is the new 7075 billet slider, and we also have the new billet 7075 mounting plate. What I want to talk about is a little bit of premature wear on factory parts and using factory parts of what we've found in our findings in machining this product. This is an all new slider. There's nothing rebuilt on it. It's all cut out of 7075. These are all new rods that's been cut. In some of our findings on these rods, clocking was critical. On the flat surface where it mounts up to the mounting plate, both ends need to be in time. So at 12 o'clock, they need to be precise. Checking about 8 of the factory rods, putting them on the table and on the machine to see if they were perfectly clocked. We found all 8 rods to be out of timing, so they were off anywhere from 2 to 8 degrees, and that means that this end would be off where this end down here would be straight at 12 o'clock. That comes from the machining process of when they're made at the factory. Also, we're going to take a look at the felt pad. We no longer have a felt pad in this unit. The felt pad always seemed to come loose when people would lube the rods on it, the WD-40, etc. PB Blaster would cause the felt pad to come off. Where it was on the gearbox, it would cause it to wad up on the gearbox and make your steering tight, so there's no more felt pad to deal with. What we did on the slider that's made here, we milled down into the slider and we created a HDPE pad that will lock down in place on the slider itself. Also, getting back to the clocking of these rods, the critical point, if they're clocked exactly right, the mounting plates, the 2 factory mounting plates, and this is just on the Formica top here in the shop, you'll notice that that one moves a good 1/8 of an inch or better. Put it on a machinist table, it'll move even more. Here is another factory plate. It's almost a good 1/8 of an inch out. It's a little less than the other, but there again, you're mounting the factory rods that are not clocked true to a plate that's not built true, which in turn is going to put anything in a bind when you tighten it down to the proper torque specifications. Over here is the new 7075 mounting block. It's all one piece. If you'll notice, it doesn't move on the table. It doesn't move on the Formica, although these other 2 factory ones have quite a bit of wiggle to them. Mounting plates out, factory rods out. It's going to wear pretty quick. Upon installation of the new slider and the new mounting block, the bottom of the gearbox is a critical point. We need to look at it. The bottom of the gearbox needs to be cleaned off where the slider pad will meet the bottom of the gearbox. So you can just take a Scotch-Brite pad, clean it up, make sure there's no scratches or debris. The stub shaft coming out of the gearbox needs to be cleaned. Emery cloth or a Scotch-Brite pad, and apply a coat of anti-seize onto the shaft. That's a steel shaft going into an aluminum block. You don't want it to lock up and weld itself on there. Again, here is the new mounting block, which will bolt into the frame. We're going to use blue Loctite on all the bolts. Talk a little bit about the rods, what we did to the rods. They are 4340 rods, cut to size. They were heat treated to 40 Rockwell, and then about 4 mils of Armalloy coating put on the rods. And again, I express, do not remove the rods from the steering slider. We will ship it with the rods intact. Also, when you install it on the machine, do not remove the rods. Removing the rods, you can damage the scraper seals and probably not get the rods put back in. So again, do not remove the slider rods. Leave them intact on the new slider. Clean the bottom of the gearbox, clean the shaft, anti-seize on the shaft. The pad mates up to the bottom of the box. And then you're going to mount your mounting plate to the machine. Put it in, put your bolts down through the gearbox, the blue Loctite, everything, and we're going to come up with some torque specifications on what to set it at. We'll be back after a while. We're in the shop. We've got the new slider assembly here with the rods installed. What you want to look at is there's 4 rubber bands on these rods. The purpose of those rubber bands is to keep these rods from sliding out. Again, I can't express enough. You want to leave the rods in the slider assembly. Do not remove the rods. It will mess up the seals. And you're probably not going to get them put back in. So again, leave the rubber bands on during the install. Once everything's installed, you can reach in there with a little pick, grab a hold of them and pull them out. Let the rubber bands break and you're good to go. The bottom of the gearbox has been cleaned already. The stub shaft has also been cleaned, and it has a light coat of anti-seize put on it. So what we're going to do, we've got the bolts to the slider rods that go through the gearbox. We've got the slider bolt, and we've got the bolts for the mounting block also laying here. Blue Loctite. So what we're going to do first is put just a little bit of Loctite on the bolt that holds the slider to the gearbox. We've got it Loctited. Again, the rods can fall out if you're not careful. That's the purpose of the rubber bands. Gearbox up out of the way. Put your slider in place. Slip the slider up onto the stub shaft. And also what we want to do here is make sure that the mating surface of the rods is at the bottom of the gearbox. And then we want to start the bolt into the slider into the gearbox. We've done got blue Loctite on that, it's ready to go. And what I'm using is a Flex 10mm ratchet wrench. It works pretty good through the tight hole that they've got here in the frame. Not much room to tighten the bolt up with. And before you get this all the way tight, we need to put the top 2 bolts through the gearbox into the rods. That's not all the way tight. So what I want to do is drop a little bit of blue on here. It's probably going to run down and drip in the floor. But we want to go ahead and put some on. And we're going to drop these through the gearbox. So you can rotate it, drop the bolt through, get it into the rod. That's that side. We're going to do the passenger side. Do a little blue Loctite on those as well. You can rotate your box all the way over to the passenger side. Drop your bolt in. Those 2 top bolts can really be a pain. So once those are in place, go back to tightening up your center bolt through the slider. And that also kind of keeps everything in line. And once you get your slider tight, we're going to put the mounting block in. So that's just a 10 ratchet wrench. And it's tight and blue Loctited. The rods are in place. We're going to take the mounting block and put it into place. We're going to have to come through, get it past that bolt. A couple ways of doing this. You can actually start the bolt itself into the block. Just a couple threads. Get this started to where it don't fall down. I think I've got a thread or 2 in place. I do. Alright, you can see that the mounting block is installed and in place. Let's go ahead. And those bolts are just started. So we're going to blue Loctite the bottom 2 bolts, and don't be afraid to put it on the bolts. We'll start it through. And that one started in place. Again, like I say, the Loctite's going to run down through the threads, and you want to use it. So we now have all 4 bolts started into the mounting plate, uppers, lowers, both sides. Now what we want to do is Loctite the bolts that goes into the mounting plate through the frame. Alright, all the mounting bolts are in. I want to tighten these down with a 3/8 ratchet. It's 10 millimeter. And these are going to tighten down 25 to 28 inch-pounds. Now that those bolts are tight, we need to get the top ones. Go ahead and run those in. They're a little tight to get to because of the A-arm is relatively close to that bolt. But you can see that I put the slider in with the rods intact and the mounting block afterwards. So as these start to run down, you want to shake your box a little bit there and make sure it's tight. Make sure it's in place. And we're not setting on the edge of the rod where it's not chamfered out to fit. You want to make sure that they're seated flat before you tighten it all the way down. Just lightly snugging these down. I want to work my way to the other side. Actually going to stand up and do this one right here. And again, that upper one is real close to the A-arm. You about have to run it all the way down by hand or use an open end wrench. Now that I've got it run all the way down, I think I can get the open end on it, or the boxed end on it. I can. This is just a 10 millimeter flex head ratchet wrench. I'll go back and check this side again. Go ahead and pull it on down. And in order to remove those rubber bands, just a small hook pick Can reach in there and get under the rubber bands. And just break them and pull them out. And it's out too. So you can see we've installed the slider, we've installed the mounting block, everything's put in place and tightened down. I'm going to stop this video, and the only thing we've got left to do is put the tie rods on, make sure everything's set to go, and this unit's done. Thank you, AJ.